Okay, continuing here. Number 35, what is the interest that would be paid to the nearest whole dollar over the life of a home loan if the home cost $150,000? The buyer obtained a 90% loan-to-value loan at 5.75% interest for 30 years, and the monthly principal and interest payments are $787.81. When we are calculating the interest paid over the life of a loan, and that's what they've asked us for, what is the interest that will be paid to the nearest whole dollar over the life of a home loan? When we are calculating interest paid over the life of the loan, we need to know two things. We need to know the payment, three things actually, and we need to know how long we're making that payment, and we need to know how much we borrowed. Well, we know the payment, $787.81 a month in principal and interest, PI, times 12 months a year, times 30 years. And if we make that payment all the way out for 30 years, we're going to pay a total of $283,611.60 over the life of the loan. But the problem is that's principal and interest combined. In order to figure out how much of that is interest, we need to subtract out the principal. So we got to know the principal. In this case, we bought a house that cost $150,000, but we only borrowed 90% of that. So if we calculate our loan amount is $135,000. So we need to subtract out that $135,000 that we borrowed over here. And that would tell us that we paid $148,611.60 in interest over the life of that loan. Notice we did not need the interest rate. This just does not matter. We need to know the monthly payment. We need to know for how long, so 12 months a year for 30 years, and then we need to know how much we borrowed. That's what we need in a interest over the life of a loan question. 36 is the lender agrees to make an 80% loan on a residential property. The sales price of the property is $285,000, but the home appraised for $287,500, so it appraised for more. How much will we charge for 1.75 loan discount points on this loan? So this is testing something as well as math. Do you know which one of these numbers is going to be used in making the loan? The loan-to-value ratio is always going to be applied to the lower of either the purchase price or the appraised amount, whichever one is lower. So in this case, the loan is going to be based on this $285,000. They're going to lend 80% of that $285,000. So $285,000 times the 80% loan-to-value ratio would give us a loan amount of $228,000. And we're going to buy 1.75 discount points, and that's 1.75%, because each discount point costs 1%. And that's a grand total of $3,990 for the discount points. $37 says a borrower has been approved for a 7.25% fixed rate 30-year mortgage loan for $172,000. The closing will take place on November 24th. How much interim interest will the borrower owe on the mortgage loan at closing? So interim interest. Interim interest is always from the day of closing till the end of the month. So November 24th through November 30th, which is 7 days. We have 7 days of interim interest. If we take that loan of $172,000 and multiply times the 7.25% interest rate, what we end up with for annual interest is $12,470 per year. but we want to divide that down to daily, so divide it by 360, and that equals $34.64 daily times 7 days, for a total of $242.48. $242.48. 38 is a super simple question with one little trickeration in there. The question is, do you know that excise taxes, how much in excise tax we paid on the transaction at closing? Do you know that excise taxes are based on the sales price? It says a purchaser buys a home for $192,900 and assumes the seller's loan balance of $174,300. How much in excise tax? Excise taxes are always based on the sales price and nothing else. So in this case, $192,900. Remember, when you talk about excise taxes, everything needs to be in multiples of $500. So 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, so on and so forth. This is not in a multiple, so this number right here is not a 5 or a 0, so we need to fix that. And when we have to fix it, we always round up. So we are rounding up here to the next $500, which is going to be $193,000. Because our choices would have been to either go down to $192,500 or go up to $193,000. And since we always have to go up, then it's going to be this one right here. So $193,000, and we're simply going to divide that by 500, and that tells us our excise taxes are $386. Not sure why number 39 is not there, but number 40, what's the total interest paid over the lifetime of a 30-year fixed rate $175,000 note issued at 4.5% interest and carrying a monthly PI payment of $1,337? So again, remember, when we talk about interest paid over the life of a loan, we need to know that monthly PI payment, we need to know how much we borrowed, and we need to know for how long. We do not need to know the interest rate right there. That interest rate, we don't need it. Doesn't matter. So what do we have? We have a monthly payment of $1,337 a month. We are making that 12 months a year, and we're making it for 30 years. And if we do that math, we end up with a total of $481,320 paid for principal and interest, because this is a PI payment, over the life of that loan. Now, of course, not all of that is interest. Some of it was borrowed. Specifically, $175,000 of it was borrowed money. So if we subtract that out, we're left with $306,320 paid in interest over the life of that loan. Number 41 says Leslie obtains a 75% loan-to-value loan to purchase her $400,000 home. She's debating between a 15-year note with 4.5% interest rate that amortizes at $7.64 or a 30-year note at the same interest rate which amortizes at $5.06. Based on this information, what would be the difference in the interest paid over the life of these two loans? Well, I'm going to say the first thing we need to know is how much we're borrowing. We're answering a loan question. We need to know how much we're borrowing. And we're borrowing 75% of the $400,000 purchase. So I'm going to multiply that. And what I come up with is a $300,000 loan. Now remember, when we talk about interest paid over the life of the loan, we need to know the loan amount, which we now have. we need to know for how long. And they told us that because we're comparing two of them. We're comparing a 15-year and we're comparing a 30-year. And the other piece of the puzzle that we needed to know was the monthly payment. They did not give us the monthly payment, but they gave us what we need to calculate the monthly payment. So let's look at that 15-year note. It says that 15-year note amortizes at $7.64 per thousand. Remember, that amortization amortizes that. That's a payment for every $1,000 that we borrowed. So $7.64 times 300, because we borrowed $300,000, will tell us that our monthly payment on the 15-year note is $22.92. So this is the 15-year. Well, let's look at the 30-year. On the 30-year, we're paying $5.06 per thousand. We're borrowing the same $300,000. So when we do that, our monthly PI is $1,518. Now we have everything we need in order to get to how much interest is paid over the life of each one of these loans. So we're just going to kind of draw a dividing line here. And we're going to work on that. Let's look at the 15-year note first. With the 15-year note, what we know is this. We know that the payment is $22.99 per month times 12 months a year times 15 years. And if we do that math, $22.92, I wrote that down wrong earlier. $22.92 per month times 12 months a year times 15 years gives us a total of $412,560 in principal and interest. Now, of course, we borrowed $300,000 of that, so we need to subtract it out. And that gives us a total amount of interest of $112,560 on the 15-year note. Now, on the 30-year note, we're paying $15.18 a month times 12 months a year times 30 years. And when we do that, our math tells us that we're paying $546,480 in principal and interest. But of course, $300,000 of that was borrowed money. So that leaves us with interest of $246,480. Now the question has asked us, what is the difference between these two amounts? What is the difference between the interest paid on the 15-year and the interest paid on the 30-year? So if we want to see the difference between the two, we simply need to subtract them. $246,480 in interest on the 30-year note minus $112,560 on the 15-year note, and that gives us a difference in interest paid of $133,920. So that's how much they save by going with a 15-year note versus a 30-year note. Scroll back up so you can see all of that. We first calculated the loan amount, and then we calculated the monthly payment for each loan, and then we brought that all the way down until we figured the interest owed for each loan, and then finally the difference in the interest for the two loans. Number 42. A 7,800 square foot warehouse building that has an expected economic life of 75 years was constructed 20 years ago. The effective age of the building, however, is 15 years. In the surrounding area, properties of a similar character can be placed for $50 per square foot. The land upon which the building is constructed is valued at $285,000. Based on this information, what's the expected value of the subject property using the cost approach? So it's a cost approach question. In a cost approach question, we have 3 steps. Step 1, land value. Step 2 is going to be to add the replacement value of the structure. And then step 3 is going to be to subtract any depreciation of just the structure. Not the land, just the structure. So let's see what information we can fill in here. Here's what we know. It says a 7,800 square foot building. Well, that's going to help us with our replacement value, so we're going to put it right here. Has an expected economic life of 75 years. Okay, well that's going to help us with our depreciation. It's expected to last 75, so that goes on the bottom there. Was constructed 20 years ago. The effective age of the building, however, is 15 years. Remember, we don't care how old the building is. We care how old the building looks, acts, and feels. Its effective age. That's 15 years. So it's going to be 15 over 75 down here. In the surrounding area, properties of similar character can be replaced for $50 per square foot. So that goes with our replacement value. So 7,800 square feet times $50 per square foot. The land upon which the building is constructed is valued at $285,000. Based on this information, what's the expected value of the subject property using the cost approach? So let's work through our math here. Here's what we know. We know that the land value doesn't need any work. It's $285,000. Replacement value of $7,800 times $50 a square foot. Well, if we do that math, that we get a replacement cost of $390,000. So let's do our math over here in the margins, or our final tally. $285,000 for the land, plus $390,000 for the replacement value of the building. And of course we got that by simply multiplying those numbers there, 7,800 times 50. And now we need to subtract any depreciation that we have. And what we know about the depreciation is that we've lost 15 out of 75 years. So we're going to do the math, and we're going to simply divide 15 divided by 75. And remember, this is a rate, so we're going to be times 100. And that building is 20% depreciated. Now remember, it's 20% of just the building. So the only thing we're depreciating is the building's value, not the land. So it's going to be $390,000 times 20% depreciation. And that gives us depreciation of $78,000. And so that's the number we need to subtract out. Now we're ready with our final tally. We start at the top, $285,000 plus $390,000 minus $78,000. And when we do the final math there, we're going to come up with a valuation of $597,000 for that property. That property valued at $597,000. Okay. Number 43 says a very large commercial transaction has recently closed for a total sales price of $9.85 million. The brokers involved in the transaction have a unique commission agreement where the listing firm will be compensated with 6% of the first $2 million of sales price, 5% of the next $2 million, and 4% on any remainder. Based on this, what's the anticipated commission due to the listing firm? This is just, they're trying to trick your brain here. There's nothing complex about this. It's really just 3 separate commissions. It says they've been compensated 6% of the first $2 million. So that's $2 million times 6%. They're also being paid 5% of the next $2 million. So that's going to be $2 million times 5%. And then they're being paid 4% on any remainder. Well, how much is left? We started with $9.85 million, $9,850,000. So we've already paid commission on the first $2 million. That can go away. We've also paid commission on the second $2 million. That can go away. That leaves us with $5,850,000 that we haven't been paid commission on. And that's going to be paid at 4% commission. And then the commission for the total transaction is going to be all these added together. So if we look at the first one, a 6% commission on $2 million, well, that's going to be $120,000. On the second one, a 5% commission on $2 million is going to be $100,000. And then the third one, a 4% commission on $5,850,000 is going to be $234,000. So our total commission is going to be those 3 numbers added together. $120,000 plus $100,000 plus $234,000 equals a total commission on the transaction of $454,000. Right. Number 44 says a 65-unit apartment complex has 50 units that rent for $900 each monthly, and the remaining 15 rent for $1,000 each monthly. The property sustains vacancy and collection losses that total 7% of the gross potential income. The property manager charges a 9% management fee, which is calculated based on the gross effective income. If other operating expenses on the property total $187,000 annually, and similar complexes in the area have produced a capitalization rate of 11%, what should an appraiser find as the estimated market value of the property? So they want to know the market value of an income-producing property. Well, that sounds like the income capitalization approach to me. So the income capitalization approach, remember, our T-bar is this. On top is the net operating income, and then on the bottom is the value and the cap rate, capitalization rate. And so what is the question asking me for? What should an appraiser find as the estimated market value? They want to know the value. So the formula says it's going to be net operating income divided by a capitalization rate. Well, they gave us the capitalization rate. It's right there. They gave it to us, 11%. What they didn't give us was the net operating income, so we've got to calculate that. So let's start making some notes for ourselves. First of all, we need to write down the formula. When we're working on a formula for net operating income, the first place we start is something called gross potential income. Gross potential income is the total amount of rent that we could possibly collect. And from there, we start subtracting out things. We subtract our vacancy and our losses. Any vacancy, losses, unpaid rent would be subtracted out. And that leaves us with something called gross effective income. And from gross effective income, we subtract a big category of things called operating expenses. Operating expenses are everything that it takes to run the property. Management fees and salaries and utilities. Once we've done that, we're left with net operating income. Now, if we wanted to continue going further, we could subtract out our debt service payments, our monthly mortgage, and then that would give us the before tax cash flow. So now let's fill in the information we have here. A 65-unit apartment complex. Well, that's information we need for the gross potential income because it's 65 units and they rent for $900 a month. Now remember, everything in this formula is annual, so we want to multiply that times 12. It says the remaining 15, let's get rid of that. The remaining 15 rent for $1,000 each monthly, so we also have 15 that rent for $1,000 monthly times 12. Okay, so we're done with that. Property sustains vacancy and collection losses, a total 7% of the gross potential income. So I'm just going to put 7% here as a note for myself because I'm now done with that. The property manager charges a 9% management fee, which is calculated based on the gross effective income. Well, the management fee is an operating expense, so it's going to go down here in the operating expenses, okay? And we'll calculate it in a minute. We're just putting notes for ourselves. If other operating expenses on the property total $187,000 annually, so we also have other operating expenses of $187,000. And similar complexes in the area have a capitalization rate of blah, blah, blah. We've got everything we need now in order to calculate the net operating income of this property. So let's look at it. The gross potential income, here's what we know. We have 65 units that rent for $900 a month times 12 months a year. So when we figure that out, we take the, we have not 65 units that rent for $900 a month. That's my fault. It's actually only 50 of them. I've made a boo-boo on my notes. There's 65 total, but that number should be 50 units that rent for $900 a month. I apologize. So 50 units that rent for $900 a month times 12. And when we do that math, we come up with $540,000 for those units. And then we have another $180,000 for the other 15 units that rent for $1,000 a month, because 15 times 1,000, it's 15,000 times 12 is $180,000, so plus $180,000. That gives us a gross potential income of $720,000 on this property. That's our gross potential income. Now, they told us that we had vacancy that we needed to get rid of 7%. So 7% of $720,000, if you wanted to see the math, it's $720,000 times 7%. So our vacancy is going to be $50,400. And that'll leave us with a gross effective income of $669,600. So now we need to subtract out our operating expenses. The first one's going to be our management fee. So that management fee of 9%, 9% of $669,600. So again, $669,600 times 9%. And that is $60,264. But also we have another $187,000 in other operating expenses. So when we take all of that out, we are left with an NOI of $422,336. $422,336 for our net operating income. Now, that's the number we need here in our formula. So now we know the net operating income, and if you remember correctly, they gave us the capitalization rate of 11%. We have everything we need to know in order to calculate the value of that property. So we're simply going to look at $422,336 divided by the 11% capitalization rate. And once we do that, that will give us a value for that property of $3,839,418.18. I don't think they asked us to round. They did not ask for a rounded number. So that's our answer. $3,839,418.18. So we simply had to get to our NOI so we could divide it by the capitalization rate that they already gave us. Number 45. So the property has an assessed tax value of $118,000 in an area where the local ad valorem tax rate is 93 cents per $100 of value. 93 cents per $100 of value. The property is under contract with a scheduled closing of April 18th and the seller owning the day of closing. The buyer will pay the tax bill in full later in the year when it is issued. Based on this information and using the 360-day year, what's the correct entry on the settlement statement for the property tax proration? So they want us to do a property tax proration, which means we need to know a couple of things. Number one, which way is the money flowing? And number two, how much are the taxes that we're prorating? So let's write down our two statements when we do a property tax proration. The seller owes always from January 1 through the day of closing. And in this case, that's April 18th. So April 18th, which means the buyer's going to owe the remainder of the year. So the buyer owes April 19th through December 30th. It says the buyer will pay the tax bill in full later in the year when it's issued. So if the buyer's paying outside of closing, then we want to charge the other person. We want to do the opposite of what's happening out in the real world. So buyer is paying later in the year, so we need to make sure the seller pays. So that's what our proration is going to look like. We are prorating from January 1 through April 18th. Now we just need to know how much we're prorating. So it says, what they tell us is we have an assessed tax value of $118,000. And it says the local tax rate is 93 cents per 100, so 0.93%. So if we multiply that out, we end up with an annual tax due of $1,097.40 annually. Now, we need to break that down into daily. So we're going to take that annual expense of $1,097.40 and divide it by 360 days, and that gives us a daily rate of $3.05. Now we just need to know how many days we've got. How many days are we working with here? Well, we have 30 days in January, 30 days in February, 30 days in March, and 18 days in April. So that's 30, 60, 90, plus 18 is 108 days. 108 days. So times 108 right here. So $3.05 times 108 days, that's going to be $329.40. And because it's seller owes, that's going to be debit seller. And if we debit the seller, then it's credit buyer. $329.40, debit seller, credit buyer. Number 46 is a lot measures 180 feet deep by 150 feet wide. Land in the subdivision is priced at $72,000 per acre. Based on this information, what is the probable sales price of the property? So I always like to draw my picture. It's 180 feet wide and 150 feet deep. Now based on that, we can figure square footage. We can go 180 by 150 or times 150. That is 27,000 square feet. They want to know how much the land cost. What's the probable sales price? The problem is they gave us price per acre and we've got square footage. We got to match them up. We can't work with it that way. So we can do one of two things. We can either break that price per acre down into a price per square foot, or we can change the square footage into acreage. I'm simply going to change the square footage into acreage. So I'm going to take the 27,000 square feet, and I'm going to divide that by 43,560 square feet in an acre. And when we do that, we've got 0.61983 acres times $72,000 per acre, and that gives us a grand total of $44,628.10 for this lot. $44,628.10 to purchase that lot in that neighborhood where land is priced at $72,000 an acre. Number 47, Carla is a broker affiliate of Blue Sky Realty and has executed an exclusive right to sell listing agreement with the owner of 124 Oak Street in Mebane. The listing agreement calls for a total listing commission of 6% to be charged on the transaction. Blue Sky Realty has agreed that they will share the commission with a cooperating brokerage firm by offering 2.4% of the sales price to any firm producing a buyer. Based on this information, how much can Blue Sky expect to receive as compensation if the property sells for $415,000? So here's what we know about the transaction. We know that the total commission is 6% total. We know that we can calculate the amount of that if we want to. I'm going to show you a couple different ways you can go about this kind of a question. To me, the easiest way is to say, okay, it's a 6% total commission, and they're cooperating by offering 2.4% to somebody else, so I'm just going to do 6 minus 2.4. Now, when you do that, remember you can't use the percent button on your calculator. It's just 6, not 6%. But 6 minus 2.4 leaves 3.6% for the listing side. And then you could just say $415,000 times 3.6%. And that is a total of $14,940. Now you could also do it this way. If you wanted to, if that way doesn't make sense for you, you could simply take the purchase price of $415,000 and multiply it times 6%, because that's the total commission. And you would find out, grab my calculator here, you would find out that 415 times 6% is $24,900. Now that's the total. What we also know is that they're not keeping all of that because they're paying somebody else 2.4%. So we could take the same $415,000 and multiply it times 2.4% to see how much the cooperating firm is going to make. And the cooperating firm is going to make $9,960. Well, folks, if I'm charging $24,900 total and I'm paying out $9,960, couldn't I subtract the two to figure out how much I'm keeping? And I bet, I'm just going to bet, that if we do $24,900 minus $9,960, we're going to end up with, wow, look at that, $14,940, which is suspiciously exactly the same as if we did it the other way. So it doesn't matter which way you want to go, but the amount of commission being kept by the listing firm is indeed $14,940. Either way you want to work that out is fine. Some people get a little bit of a mind block on those. Alright, number 48 says the manager of an apartment complex that consists of 120 units is preparing an estimated operating budget for the coming year. All of the units in the complex rent for $1,200 monthly. The complex has annual property taxes of $150,000 and other operating expenses that total $615,000. The owner of the complex has taken on a mortgage note with annual principal and interest payments of $400,000. If the property typically has vacancy and collection losses that total 7% of the gross potential income, what is the estimated before-tax cash flow or spendable income, because they're the same thing, that the property will produce for the owner? So they want to know what's the before-tax cash flow. What is the estimated before-tax cash flow? So we got to go right back to writing out that big long formula so that we can calculate our before-tax cash flow. Remember, we start with gross potential income, which is the maximum amount of rent we could possibly collect. And then we subtract our vacancy or losses, any rent that we don't collect. And that leaves us with gross effective income, which is the amount of rent we actually collected. From there, we subtract out something called operating expenses, which covers all of our operating costs. And that leaves us with something called net operating income. And from there, we want to subtract out our debt service or mortgage payments. And once we've done that, finally, we are left with our before-tax cash flow. So let's go fill this thing back in. It says the manager of an apartment complex consists of 120 units. Well, I can stop right there because that 120 units is going to help me to fill out or figure out my gross potential income. It's preparing an estimated operating budget for the coming year. All of the units in the complex rent for $1,200 monthly. So it's 120 times 1,200, and that's monthly. Remember, everything in this formula is annual, so we need to multiply that times 12. So now we've dealt with everything up to there. It says the complex has annual property taxes of $150,000. Well, property taxes are an operating expense. So we have property taxes of $150,000, which is going to put them right here on the operating expense line. And other operating expenses that total $615,000. Well, put it on the operating expense line. Okay. The owner of the complex has taken on a mortgage note with annual principal and interest payments of $400,000. So that's our debt service. It's $400,000, and it's annual already, so we don't need to do anything with it. We don't have to multiply times 12 because it's already annual. If the property typically has vacancy and collection losses that total 7% of the gross potential income, so vacancy goes back up here, 7%. What's the estimated before-tax cash flow that the property will produce for the owner? Well, we have everything we need to know to be able to calculate that. So let's work on the math here. Gross potential income. We've got 120 units making $1,200 a month times 12 months a year. So that's a gross potential income of $1,728,000. And we're losing vacancy of 7%. So that would be $1,728,000 times 7%. And that is $120,960 in vacancy. So minus $120,960 in vacancy. That gives us a gross effective income of $1,607,040 for gross effective income. Then we subtract our operating expenses of $150,000 and $615,000, and that will give us an NOI of $842,040. And finally, from there, we want to subtract out our $400,000 in debt service. And finally, if we do the math there, that will give us a before-tax cash flow of $442,040. $442,040 for before-tax cash flow. And then finally, we have made it to the end of this review. A rental duplex generates monthly rent of $950 per unit. If an investor wishes to purchase the property utilizing a gross rent multiplier of 105, what is the amount the investor is willing to pay for the property? Well, we have a formula for gross rent multipliers, and it looks like this. It's a T-bar that looks like this. It's so important that you have all of these T-bars memorized, these formulas. You just have to have them memorized, committed to memory. That's not understanding math. That's not even learning as much as it is just memorization. Make a flashcard with every single one of them and have them imprinted on your brain. With gross rent multiplier, we simply have on the top the value of the property, and then on the bottom we have the monthly rent and the gross rent multiplier. Now the question they've asked us here is what is the amount the investor is willing to pay for the property? So they want to know the value of the property. They gave us the gross rent multiplier of 105. They also gave us monthly rent of $950. There's nothing to do here, folks, but plug that into the formula. So monthly rent of $950. But there is one catch. They said this was a duplex. So $950 times 2 gives us monthly rent of $1,900. And then we can take that number and multiply it times our gross rent multiplier of 105. And that gives us a purchase price for that property that the investor is willing to pay, $199,500. $199,500 is what the investor is willing to pay for that property.